Welcome to DC Local Leaders, the podcast where we talk to C-suite leaders within the DC area. Our guests share their pathways to success and the important moments that impacted their careers. Lean in as we get the inside scoop on how they are shaping their industries, how they lead, manage, and connect with others. From the sectors of aerospace, defense, tech, IT, and more, this is Local Leaders. Your host has been making meaningful connections with industry leaders for over 15 years. Here's Philip Nathram.
Welcome back to the DC Local Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Philip Nathram. It's 2021, and we are excited. We've got multiple episodes coming at you over the next couple of months. Couple of different series. We've got a COO series coming up, Women's Leader series coming up, Nonprofit series. And as always, we hope that we're bringing you a value, and we really appreciate all of the responses that you guys have given us. I've taken a look at some of the reviews and just really appreciate all the kind words that everyone has provided back. Please remember, if you haven't already, to rate, review, subscribe. I do want to take a second here to tell you guys that we are also available on the Notecast app. Notecast is a podcast listening app that allows you to take notes directly from the podcast. So if today's episode you're listening in and there's a book recommendation or there's a quote or there's something that you find valuable that you want to make sure that you remember, and maybe you're driving, maybe you're running, maybe you're sitting somewhere and you're unable to write it down, you can simply tap the screen. It'll clip that, make a note, and also transcribe it into text for you as well. So you don't have to write anything down. You have a clip of exactly what you heard, and then you have the text that go along with it. So Notecast is available on both Apple and Google Play Store. So check out Notecast and, send us an email. Let us know if you like it or not. Yeah, let's get into today's episode. Today's episode is with Rahul Pandhi. Rahul is the CEO of Collaborlink, based right here out of Tysons. And Rahul just shares with us openly and honestly how he took this small family-owned company, and it was predominantly doing commercial work, and he grew it into a federal contracting company that now has more than 300 people. But it wasn't easy, and there were moments and ups and downs and growth opportunities, and he just opens up with all of that. And any entrepreneur, any leader out there would really appreciate his conversation. In addition to Collaborlink, he shares with us his personal journey with just trying to be the best version of himself that he can, and how he does what he calls mental hygiene. Mental hygiene, keeping the windshield wipers on the mind, number of different practices. He started running triathlons, just an overall great story, and I'm really excited to bring that to you. So I don't want to take up any more time. I really appreciate everyone tuning in today, and let's get into the episode. All right, and we're back with another episode of DC Local Leaders Podcast. Today, we are in the offices of Collaborlink. Our guest today is Rahul Pandhi. Rahul is here with us today. How you doing?
Hey, Phil. Or is it Phil or Philip?
You know what? I introduce myself as Philip all the time, but most people call me Phil. It's weird. When I say my own name, I say Philip.
But then you go by Phil.
And then I go by Phil.
Interesting. Well, hey, I'm really happy to be here, and stoked to do this with you. Yeah,
thank you for making the time. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate you doing this with us. I think I mentioned something to you about this podcast maybe more than a year ago.
Yeah, man, we had a random meeting at a corporate event probably a year plus ago, and it sounds like that's when this idea was kind of still in infancy stages for you. But yeah, you mentioned it to me, and I was like, that's a fantastic idea to set up a podcast.
Yeah, and it took me almost a year to convince myself that it was a good idea. Right? And then I just picked up.
So speed. It was literally in just ideation stage at that point. You hadn't acted on anything. You were just sort of like putting it out there as an idea.
Yeah, just putting it out to the universe, and really it was testing the idea on other people to see what their response was. Like, hey, what if I did this thing?
And what was the range of reactions? Because I know when you and I talked about it. And I'd known you for all of like 45 minutes at that point. I was like, this is a fantastic idea. Like, you should absolutely do this. But what did other people give you?
Yeah, not everyone was that way, right?
Oh, really?
Some people were like, yeah, try it out, see what happens. Or like, but there's always the yeah, but people's like, yeah, but there's thousands of podcasts. I mean, like, there's people already doing that. Or like,
yeah.
So you're going to, I think that's with anything, right? And it's fear. And that's a lot of what we want to talk about today.
Right.
Fear manifests itself in our lives. lives and how to overcome that or how to work through that or just how to even recognize that? How do we become more aware?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say one last thing on that. I mean, I think that theme of but is sort of consistent throughout all of our journeys, that when you're sort of going through your life, there's always going to be a crowd that has an opinion contrary to your sort of belief system, the buts or the naysayers. And I think it's awesome that you're sort of powering through that and you've gone on to set this thing up.
Well, I
So
appreciate
kudos.
you saying that. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
Collaborlink. You're the CEO of Collaborlink. How long have you guys been in business?
So Collabralink is a family-owned business. The company started in 2003. It was actually started by my dad, Rahul Pandhi, and he set it up as sort of a sole proprietorship, kind of one-man band, independent consulting kind of gig. And he ran it that way, successfly until about 2008, which is when I joined. So I came on board in 2008. I took the CEO seat, and the objective was, let's grow this thing. Let's not have it be an independent consultancy. Let's try to build a business. And so I came on board 2008 full time. Took over as CEO, and here I am 12 years later, still in that same chair.
So what kind of stuff do you guys do? What was he consulting, and what do you guys do?
Yeah. So Collaborlink we got our start back in that 2003 timeframe. We're operating the commercial sector. So the business and my background. So we started out of the suburbs of Chicago, and initially the work was my dad basically doing sort of gigs with his former employers where he was helping, large enterprise IT implementations, and he was doing program management. He was helping review processes and figuring out where bottlenecks were occurring. And so sort of a program manager / strategic advisor to these large enterprise IT implementations at big Fortune 100 companies. So his first client was Motorola. And that heritage really sort of stuck for us. We basically had this, commercial, agile mindset. When you operate in the commercial space and you're a little Collaborlink and you're going up against Accenture and Tata Consulting and Satyam at the time, you got to be really nimble. You got to be really agile. You got to be willing to embrace emerging technology. And that's exactly what he did in that era. Is he just got really at the forefront of some new emerging technology that was sort of nascent stages at that time, which we now refer to as low code, no code software development. And he helped to kind of be a strategic advisor on programs of that sort in the commercial sector. So when I came on in 2008, the idea was, well, let's take all of that know-how, that commercial know-how around implementing emerging tech, and bring it, to the federal marketplace, which is sort of the division that I opened up, and really apply that kind of commercial mindset in a different sector, and that's basically the spawn of how Collaborlink grew and how we built the business.
So you went from being a single person consulting firm to how many employees do you have now?
So today we're about 315, 315 employees. So yeah, when I joined my dad, he had jointly we worked together. We won a project at Motorola, and we hired about 2 employees. So it was my dad and 2 other billable employees. I was pure business development and sort of pure growth, and it was a really, really interesting time and sort of difficult time, and not so dissimilar from what we're going through now. When I joined him in 2008, basically the economy collapsed. Within 9 months, we went into the Great Recession. Lehman Brothers, first Bear Stearns collapsed, then Lehman Brothers collapsed, and that contract that we had at Motorola got terminated midstream. So Motorola basically said, sorry guys, we're cutting all consultants. We got to shut this thing down. So we went from 3 employees back down to, well, we kept our staff, but we went to 0 revenue.
Right.
Basically in the blink of an eye. And yeah, so that's when, things got sort of really challenging, and we really had to kind of figure out where we were going to go with the business. And so, that's what basically led me to the federal sector at that point.
So that was your pivot that,
Yeah.
hey, we need, the commercial sector, we need to find something else to do. And
That's exactly right. There was no budget. No commercial entities had budget. And I'm sitting in Chicago, and I'm looking at my bank account, the corporate bank account, and I'm counting down the weeks and months that we had left
for payroll and everything else. Right?
I mean, there was at one point, I remember looking at it, I mean, we had maybe 6 weeks before we were going to be insolvent. And now, luckily, at that point, I'd put down a lot of shoe leather in chasing federal work. And I was, fortunate enough to hit a federal contract that I'd bid on that just immediately sort of turned our fortunes. But yeah, I mean, it got pretty dire. And
what kind of stuff was going through your mind when you're looking at these ledgers and you're looking at this balance sheet and you're those things that you're thinking about, like, we've got 4 months left, 6 months left. I've got these employees that they have families. They're counting on me. Like, what's that feel like to you?
Well, I'll tell you, in retrospect, I can look back on it and I can say to you that there's no better motivator than poverty or than survival, right? This was just straight up survival instinct mode, right?
Yeah.
It just kicks in. You just think to yourself, I have to do everything humanly possible right now to keep this business alive. And what do I have to do to get to next week? What do I have to do to get to next month? And that's the way you start thinking. And so in terms of what was going through in my mind, it was pure survival instinct. It was, get your butt on a plane, get out to DC, meet with customers, meet with other vendors, and kick and claw and scratch for anything you can grab and go get revenue. And that was basically what was going through my mind. It was either do that or go find a job, and I knew I didn't want to go find a job. I knew I didn't want to sort of go back to corporate. I knew I didn't want to, I didn't want to have a boss again. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to build my own business. And so it was really survival instinct and just, like I said, kicking, clawing, and scratching for any bit of revenue I could generate, any bit of revenue I could find. And so, like I said, in retrospect, you can say that it was sort of a huge motivator. I can't lie to you. I was certainly worried at the time and certainly stressed about what might happen, what could happen. But I tried to, I think when you're in that situation, you just go heads down and you just go straight into getting it done, basically.
Yeah. Sounds like you were at a jumping off point. I talk about that with a couple other people, and the way that I define that is just that a moment in time or a scenario or a set of circumstances where you can't continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
But you're unsure of what to do next, but you have to do something, right? And it sounds like you weren't going back to a corporate structure.
That's right.
You weren't doing that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something really powerful that, there's no motivation like no alternative.
Right.
Right? There's, if you want to take the island, burn the boats.
That'll really light a fire under your
There's
behind.
no going back.
But in terms of jumping off points, I feel like I had a couple. And one even prior to that point that I mentioned where I had to go pivot to federal. I had a major jumping off point just making the decision to sign up with Collaborlink, to join my dad, to take ownership of this business and to grow it. And I was post MBA, and I was working in a strategy consulting boutique at the time called LEK Consulting. And
In Chicago?
In Chicago,
Okay.
yeah. And I'd been there for 2 years, and I'd been cranking. I mean, just, working insane hours. I was doing a bunch of private equity, strategic due diligence, and I was just burnt. I was burnt out. And I had sort of been, throughout my career, for whatever reason, conditioned to think that you have to sort of build this resume that leads you to some, elite blue blood, sort of career. So I thought, I'm going to do this strategy consulting thing. I got my MBA. Now I'm going to go into private equity. And I was really sort of steering my career in that direction. And like I said, the economy was starting to falter in 2008, and I was interviewing at a bunch of private equity funds, and they were basically saying, hey, look, come back in a year. Things are a little bit weird right now. This was before, the banks had collapsed, but they'd already start to see credit markets seize up, so they just weren't doing any deals. And so I had to make a decision at that point. It was like either stay at LEK and, continue to be miserable, which is what I was at that point. I was recently married. I was never home to spend time with my wife. I was just working like a dog. My decision was stay at LEK and continue to kind of make my way through this misery, or do something else. And that led me to this conversation about Collabralink, and that led me to this point where I had to, make a call and take a risk. And in the end, I'm so glad I chose to sort of take that risk. I'm so glad I kind of took the leap. But that was the first jumping off point.
Yeah.
Right? Even prior to this whole hey, we've got no revenue, go figure it out kind of thing.
Yeah. So your experience of that thought process of here's the outline of what I need to do to be successful. Go to school, do this, get a job in this that looks like this, and then do that, do the next thing and the next thing. How does that play into your company culture that you've set up here and your hiring? I mean, because you took an atypical path, right? Are you a little bit more forgiving when you meet people that have also done the same? Or, are you looking for, what do you look like? Do you guys hire for personality? Like, I think I can work with this person and they're a hustler.
Right.
But they may not have the hard skills that you have or that you need. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So, well, so as it relates to company culture, it's such a sort of organic and intangible thing. It's really hard to put your finger on. But we've talked about it for a long, long time as an executive team. And I think that that's the key to company culture, is having sort of deliberate and intentional conversations around it as a senior leadership team, because it's really hard to sort of truly absolutely steer it in a particular direction. But so long as you have intentionality around it, you can guide it. And what I found is if you take your foot off that gas pedal, if you stop having intentionality around culture, if you stop having the conversations as a leadership team, it will go off in tangents. It will go off in a direction you perhaps don't intend. But to answer your original question, in relation to, the folks that we hire and sort of whether I look for a particular background or what have you, I would suggest that we are open-minded, right? I think that, there are certain, roles that we're hiring for, developers and technical staff and things like that, where the experience is relevant, right? They've got to have the technical chops, but we're sort of less worried about the pedigree of the resume. And I think when I grew up, sort of coming up, my big focus for whatever reason was on resume and pedigree. And I think that's okay, right? It didn't sort of lead me astray per se.
It didn't hurt.
No, it didn't hurt, but it was just, I don't know why it was instinct or reflex for me that, you go to college and then you get a job with a big company. That's what you do, right? And then you do that for a few years, and you get an MBA, and then you try to land at one of these kind of like high flying name consulting firm or investment bank. And I sort of got caught up in that mode. And I think what my lesson learned is that's not the only path. There are other paths to success. You don't have to do that. And I think it worked out just fine for me, and I wouldn't change it. But I think if I were talking to my younger self, or if I was talking to, when I speak to college kids today, my lesson to them is, or my advice to them is, that's not the only path, right? You can use your 20s to try different things, to experiment, to be entrepreneurial, to not go join big corporate. You don't have to do that. That's not the only pathway to success. In fact, I would argue that, perhaps there are more rapid pathways to success by trying to be an entrepreneur right from the jump and things like that. Now, it's a scary leap to make, but anyhow, those two things, culture and sort of pedigree and things like that, I think are somewhat related, but I mean, the way we do things here at Collaborlink is we're basically looking for smart people, and pedigree is not nearly as critical.
Yeah. So with 300 some odd people, would you still, because even when you introduced the company, right, you said we're a family-owned business.
Yeah.
You still maintain that part. It sounds like that's...
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we try to keep that sort of family feel definitely alive and persistent through the way that we treat folks, the way that we talk to our teams. You know, that's definitely a core component of the culture here.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and I think I noticed that when I walked in the door, actually, because they didn't. I don't know that they really knew who I was, and they're like, well, all right, let's see what he needs, and you know, they were really nice to me, right? They were just like, we're not really sure why you're here, but you seem like you know why you're here. And, well, let me show you where the coffee is. And it was just very, like, they were just very making me feel comfortable. And they're like, you can try this room and this room. And we went around and found one. But I could just tell right away that, like, it wasn't, even though you're in a full floor, in a very nice building, very nice Class A office, which can be intimidating sometimes when you walk in, very professional when you walk in. But the vibe from the people showed right through. So
That's
I wanted
awesome.
to make sure that that I told you that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important for you to know.
Super
that.
pumped to hear that. And that's I mean, that's the vibe you got when there's only like 6 people in the office.
Right.
I've been very lucky to have such an amazing team and staff, and everyone really embraces that like, you know, you want to be somewhere, you want to go to work every day with people you like.
Right.
And people that are sort of nice to one another, and I don't want it to feel stodgy or sort of like stiff collar, you know. So we've endeavored to make that the case.
So what does Collabralink stand for? What does that mean? I think.
The name. My God, the name. I get that question a lot, actually, and I always say, "Oh my God," because it's sort of an anticlimactic answer. So we wanted to be Collabra, and so there was no firm in 2003 that was called Collabra. The problem was there was a squatter who had bought Collabra.com, the domain. And so we contacted him, and he wanted something. And this was 2003. He wanted like $10,000. You know, $10,000. I now, in retrospect, oh my God, I wish we'd bought the domain for $10,000. That would have been a bargain by today's standards. So we sort of looked at derivations of Collabra and you know, other names that incorporated Collabra, and so we landed on Collabralink. But you know, there is meaning behind the name, and the meaning is we're linking people together through technology for the purposes of collaboration. And that's what the stuff that we implement, the software that we implement typically, and the stuff that we build and modernize for our customers, our government customers, that's typically what it does. It's this sort of modern interface through which work gets done and folks are linked together in performing that work. And so that's the genesis of the name. So
yeah.
I wish I'd bought Collabra.com.
Really? Were you a technical person at any point in time with coding and PMP and all of that, or are you more of a strategy person? And I guess the real question I have is, do you find it difficult sometimes to work with the technical people, if you yourself are not, or like, how did you make the shift if you are? Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I've always portrayed that is I know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, like, so the short answer is I was a sort of semi-technical back in, you know, post-undergrad. I worked at Accenture for a handful of years. It was called Anderson Consulting back then. And I did these very rudimentary sort of technical interface jobs. Like, you know, if I told my developer staff what I did, they'd laugh at me. But I was building interfaces in a language called PL SQL. It's like the most basic, easiest sort of style of coding.
Like DOS back in the
day.
Or something.
Well, it's not even that it's like archaic. It was just PL SQL is considered like, you know, like I don't know how you describe it. It's basically the dummies version of coding, right? I mean, okay. You know, so the most rudimentary sort of basic style of coding, I did that for like a year and a half. And then after that, I graduated into like team lead and project manager. That gave me a general understanding of sort of technical development. And then immediately thereafter, I sort of moved into strategy and kind of more of a, big picture thinking kind of thing. I did my MBA, and then, like I mentioned, post MBA. So, the thing that I did as I embarked on this journey at Collaborlink was I sort of had to do an inventory of like, well, what am I good at? And how do I apply that at Collaborlink? And immediately what I was good at was not being a technical guy, right? It was not being a on-the-ground, hands-on, billable developer. I knew that for Collaborlink to be successful, I needed to sit in a seat where I was focusing on building business, meeting customers, trying to close deals, writing proposals, and then I had to hire smart people to actually do the work.
Right.
And so I really focused on that. And I did that inventory early on. Like, as I got started in the business, I sort of said, well, where am I going to best add value to this thing? Let me focus there, and let me hire really good, smart, technical staff that can then execute the work after I go out and get it.
So this inventory, did that just come to you like, hey, I need to do this? I do some personal inventories, right?
Yeah.
And it's been a big part of my life over the last 6 years, right? I mean, we covered all the Collaborlink stuff. I want to get to know you personally.
Yeah, sure.
Had that not been suggested for me, they said, hey, look, any business that doesn't take regular inventory will surely go broke. And I was able to understand that like, even myself, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not looking at, over the last 6 years, I've become a very big personal accountability person, right?
Sure.
So if there's things going on in my life that I'm either dissatisfied with or that I'm happy with, it's probably a direct result of some sort of actions that I've been taking, right? So how else would I know that if I don't just write them all down and put an inventory together and look at what's working, what's not, take out the bad, keep the good, improve what I called bad, switch it out with something else, that sort of thing. But I had to be told that by another person.
Yeah.
Did you have a mentor? Like, where did this come from?
Back then, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure, there was advice that I was given. I can't remember specifically from who, to just sort of take stock of that, strengths and weaknesses, And of course, all of us, or not all of us, but, a lot of us have gone through doing like Myers-Briggs sort of assessments and things like that. I think, either that was advice that I'd been given, and I just can't recall from who, because I didn't have a specific mentor at the time. Or, because I remember having done that even prior to business school as well. But I had to I've had various points at which I've had to sort of like write those things down. And it's been somewhat of a theme in my life, I guess, where I'm deliberate about that, about taking stock of sort of who I am, my strengths, the character traits that I have that I think I need to sort of lean heavily on to build on. But yeah, that, so when I did that back in 2008 time frame, it was, well, I'm good at networking. I'm good at, articulating myself, generally speaking. I guess this podcast will be a test of that. I'm good at closing business. I'm good at building relationships. And so I wrote those things down, and it just led me to this understanding of, okay, well, that's the things I need to be doing at Collaborlink, and I need to farm everything else out. Like finance, farm it out, right? Invoicing, find somebody to do that. Payroll, get someone else. That was very clear to me early on. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just a quote unquote hygiene exercise. It's a good hygiene exercise for all of us to do that and to understand, what we're good at. Now, that's not to say that, I mean, I think there's a school of thought where people say, look, you also got to work on the things that you're not good at.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that there's value and truth in that, but I never over-indexed on that. Like, I never said, well, I'm terrible at spreadsheet modeling, and therefore I'm going to just hammer on that for like 2 years. I mean, I needed to get to the point where I felt comfortable and familiar enough with it. But I never over-indexed on trying to turn my weaknesses into strengths. I sort of, and I don't know what the right answer is, but I sort of went the route of, well, let's just play to the strengths and see where that takes us.
Yeah.
I think.
Are you still keeping some sort of journal, or do you do regular inventories? And what about your personal life? Are you doing that for yourself as an individual outside of, I mean, you've got a wife, you've got kids. I mean, there's other people that you show up for in your life too. And I think that, if we're not doing that personal hygiene for everything we're doing, we're not showing up as our best self everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I journal. I got my journal right here.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
I've been doing that for a few years. I every year write down my goals. I try to do sort of a mini end of year retrospective on what went, what are some of the learnings or lessons learned from this past year, and what do I want to apply going forward.
So you're almost taking like an annual inventory. So you're setting out goals, in January, and then you're assessing how that went throughout the year in the following December?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, much like many of us, right? I sit down at the start of the year and I sort of like map out things that I want to accomplish over the upcoming year. As part of that, and even before I set down and set the goals out, I think back. I do some reflection on, well, what happened this last year, and what did I learn from that? And it's not necessarily like, well, how did I do versus my goals last year? It's not even that, like, I'm not connecting the dots necessarily even to that level of detail. I'm just reflecting on the year broadly, kind of, 100,000 foot view.
Yeah.
What came from that year? What did I learn? And what are some of the lessons learned? And I write those down as well. And maybe they play into my goals, maybe they don't. But, I think the point is more that I'm doing the reflection. I think that's the more important sort of exercise for me than whether it ties to a goal or doesn't tie to a goal or not.
Right.
But yeah, I journal. I mean, I think journaling has been huge for me. I wish I was like a little bit more disciplined with it. But yeah, it's been good thing to take up for me. It's been helpful spiritually and mentally and even from a focus perspective.
Do you have a morning routine? A lot of leaders say that they either wake up at a certain time all the time, or even I've gotten that they don't set a clock. They allow the body to wake up at any time. Some people work out in the morning, the evening. Some people, read. What's your mornings look like? What's your routine?
Yeah, I'll share that with you. But one thing I wanted to tell you is there's this awesome quote that I found. Journaling is like windshield wipers for the mind. Mm. And I don't know. I just found that quote when I read it, like, oh wow, like that's kind of a cool sort of concept, right?
Keeping it clean.
Yeah, keeping it clean and sort of like helping to wipe away the noise, Yeah. So anyhow, that's on journaling. But like, my morning routine. So COVID has definitely thrown things. Well, I guess I don't even need to frame this up from COVID, pre-COVID or not. This year I took a transcendental meditation course, a TM course, and their framework is meditation twice a day for 20 minutes, once in the morning and once in the early evening. So my morning routine now consists of waking up and doing my morning meditation, and then I get either my wife or I get our 3 kids up, and we start with morning hugs with each kid.
Okay.
I've done this thing recently that's been really helpful, and this is just a new thing for me, but every evening before going to bed, I stick my phone in a drawer in the kitchen that I have like a little charging cord into. So I do not bring it upstairs with me, and I'm trying to do this thing where I don't pick up my phone for the first hour. And I can't claim credit. I mean, like, I'm sure tons of people do this, but I learned this from a guy named Ryan Holiday, who's an author, and I've read a bunch of his books. So that's his morning routine. So I sort of adopted it, and it's been awesome.
Yeah.
It's been amazing. I'm getting better sleep. I'm sort of, not picking up my phone first thing in the morning and reviewing emails. And not doing that has been amazing for my, like, sort of mood, my psyche.
Not teaching the brain to go immediately to anxiety or things that you need to do or turn it on right away. It needs to start thinking.
Yeah, all that stuff sort of like spikes, stress hormones.
Yeah.
You read the news today and like, your stress levels just immediately go up, right? So, so I'm not touching my phone for the first hour. That's been huge. And then the meditation is definitely a massive change. And then like with the kids, we try to do, I don't know if you would call them affirmations, but I make them say the same thing every morning. We do morning hugs. They say, based on us having done this for many years now, today's going to be a great day. I can and I will. And each kid says that. And I should say it too. I think I say it probably 50% of the time. But I try to get them to start the day with positivity, with sort of an affirmation that helps them understand that they could take on anything that day, and it's going to be a great day. So we do that, and then, yeah, man, then it's on to like hustle bustle. It's like get ready. I'm in the office today, so it was like quickly get dressed. Normal seasons, we'd be getting the kids out the door to school or onto the bus, and then jumping in the car and heading to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my mornings though.
Were you taught that as a kid too? The affirmations and the I am statements. I mean, I'm big on I am statements. I didn't realize until I was full on 31, I think, that I am is probably one of the most powerful statements in the human language, right? Like I am what you qualify yourself to be. And I've had a lot of experience of inserting some pretty negative things on the back end of that, right?
Yeah.
And it can happen. It's like, oh, I'm such a piece of shit. Like, whatever. and but I didn't realize that I was doing that. And if you do that long enough and for long enough, the synapses get,
they get wired that way.
Yeah, neurons that fire together wire together.
I mean, I don't know that. No, I don't think my folks did that with us growing up. And it's funny you say I am statements. I mean, they're saying today's going to be a great day. I can and I will. So it's kind of an I am statement, but it's not. Oh, you know what? I actually remember where I picked it up. So there was an Oscar ceremony I co-opted this. I mean, there was an Oscar ceremony or an Emmys or something my wife and I were watching, and there was a young woman who got up there to accept an award, and she was like all of 20 years old, and she's sitting here accepting an Oscar. I think it was an Oscar. And she turned to the camera at the very end and said, "Hey, Dad, this is for you. Today was a great day, and I can and I did." And so I Googled that afterwards. I was like, what was she talking about? And I found an article where she said that her father every morning had her and her siblings say, today's going to be a great day. I can and I will. And I read that and it just resonated for me. And I was like, man, that's powerful. That's awesome. And if I can like sort of ingrain that in the kid's head, and so much of life or so much of like these, not life, but so much of I feel like memories for children are sort of experience-based or ritual-based. Mm-hmm. And so I find this to be a ritual, right? This is a ritual that we do every morning. We give hugs. We give each other good morning hugs, and we say, today's going to be a great day. I can and I will. And so hopefully that ritual sticks. And I don't know, man, maybe it'll do something positive for them. I hope so.
I don't, there's a lot of people that I've read, and I've said this before, and I say this to a lot of people, is that and I don't have kids, but I understand, like from my own personal experiences, that, the way we speak to children becomes their internal voice.
Yeah.
I think back to myself, all the things that I used to say to myself or hear about myself or things like that eventually became that internal voice, for good or for bad. And we all have whatever we need to work with, right?
Right.
That growth is just a natural part of life. And I don't think I would go back and change anything about any of my experience, because I'm only where I'm at now because of all of those things. Yep. But that's fantastic to be able to have that morning routine with your kids and your family too, and then also for yourself, and to help them just kind of build that confidence that, I can do something, instead of finding all the ways that they can't, right?
Right. I mean, the crazy thing about parenting is there's no playbook.
Yeah.
Like all of us are sort of like making it up as we go. But I mean, I know when I first had kids, I was like, I have no idea what to do, Yeah. But then you figure it out and you sort of get into your own stride and your own rhythm. So like I said, I have no real evidence of this is going to tangibly change the arc of my kids' life or their personalities, but I hope that it will. And so, and for me, like I said, it's this idea of ritual. And so, it's something that, and it also helps my mornings, frankly.
I was going to ask.
Giving my kids a hug every morning, it's awesome.
How do you,
it's a good start.
Even saying that yourself and doing that with your kids, how do you think that kind of helps you show up it's starting them off in a great way, but your journaling and the windshield wipers. I mean, what do you think that's really, where can you see that showing up in your day, or like, especially on a day like, let's say you miss it.
Yeah.
Right? You wake up a little late and you can't do all your stuff.
Well, I mean, I think it's I hear from others that, I've changed, or that I'm sort of, bringing different energy to my relationships. And so I think it does show up in my day. I think it shows up in the energy that I bring, and sort of the way that that energy will change the way I interact with people. And I think that that's been a marked change for me because, as I went through this Collaborlink journey, there's so many ups and downs as an entrepreneur. There's so many sort of highs and so many lows. If you're riding that roller coaster and just feeling those highs and those lows to extreme, it can really affect your mood and the way you show up and the way that in the energy that you bring into a room or the energy that you bring to your relationships. And I think that doing these things is helping me to sort of bring better energy. And I'm really focused on that. I'm actually thinking about that. Like, how do I bring better energy to my relationships? How do I bring better energy to my company? How do I bring better energy to my, the rooms that I walk into? That's like a very sort of deliberate and, thing that I sort of think about. And I think all of these things that we talked about, the morning routine, the meditation, the journaling, they all manifest in that energy, basically. So I don't know. You'd have to ask somebody else that knows me, like
that knew you before you were
yeah, like how do these things sort of change the way Rahul shows up. But I feel like it's changing, man. I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I can only speak for myself, right? I know that the person I am today is a very different person from the person I was, say, prior to 2014 or so.
Right.
Right. And it's been
how so?
Just my entire outlook and attitude on life, just everything is different. And it's been an accumulation of these very small and sometimes seemingly insignificant little things, right? Like maybe so many different things. I started waking up around the same time every day, thinking, all right, well, that's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of an accomplishment, but it did something, right? It set some sort of expectation, and I take some quiet time out in the morning. I have a morning routine, as well, and having that time. I live alone, so it's always quiet time. That's the thing. What's funny about it is there's something
it's easy
different.
To get away.
Yeah, there's something different about quiet time in the morning because everyone else is also quiet, right?
Yeah.
I live alone, but 2:00 in the afternoon, there's a bunch of people outside doing stuff.
Right.
A morning routine that is I generally work out in the morning. I started doing. I mean, you're looking at me now. I was 242 pounds.
Oh wow.
So not very tall, not terribly tall, but 242 pounds wearing a size 40 pants.
Yeah, you're a big dude.
Yeah, in 2017. And I changed a lot about my own personal life pretty significantly over the years, right? And just changed some habits and some things I was doing, and begrudgingly and just with help from other people. And but throughout that process, I've had this shift in thought process too. Right. It started like with some of those taking those inventories, right? Well, so you don't like things about what's going on. Like, what are you doing?
I mean, you got to act on it.
Right. Yeah.
And actually, and so like what you just described, I think what I'm recently sort of referring to as kind of like the Tom Brady method. I mean, this guy, if you listen to him, I mean, he's basically all about small tweaks over a long period of time, effectively make for big change and huge strides. But you have to have the long view, and you have to be willing to take the steps. And that will, it can have a change. It can have an impact on your arc of your personality, the arc of your life, the arc of your career. But it just takes these, sort of micro decisions, these micro tweaks to improve, to evolve, to get better as a person in various facets. I mean, and that's what he's been all about for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And I so admire that, and like football aside, he's just a total badass.
Yeah. I mean, I agree.
His discipline, his level of sort of commitment to excellence, commitment to evolution, commitment to growth. It's unreal.
So I read Jocko Willink. Do you know Jocko Willink? Yeah. And he's big on discipline equals freedom. And I think what I found was creating, and it sometimes it seems rigid, right? Because I take these cold showers. I got that from Wim Hof.
Oh yeah, the Iceman.
Yeah, love him. But like it's sometimes it's doing things that I don't want to do. But there's going to be moments throughout the day that pop up that I don't want to do something. it's not a reason to not do it.
Right.
So I trained that in the brain, right? I just take the action. Tying it into our conversation, I didn't really make a lot of progress. I mean, I did, right? Because you will. If you're doing nothing and then you start doing something, you're going to make a lot of progress.
Right.
Because that by itself is already better. Or even if you just stop doing the bad stuff you're doing, you're just going to make progress without changing anything
organically,
else. Yeah. But counting macros, right? It gave me something tangible to do. It was an inventory, like we talked about on a couple different things here today.
Yeah.
This is what I'm putting in. This is what that equates to in terms of calories and certain, carbs, fats, and protein.
Right.
This is what I need to be doing. So if I want to have a good day, I need to hit these numbers. And if I don't, but yeah, big fan of Tom Brady. And but what I admire about him sounds like the same thing that you do, is that he's committed to doing something and he's sticking with it. You're a triathlon guy.
Yeah. I do tries. Yep.
When did you start doing that? And the real question, so now that we're talking about some of the performance-based stuff, but with the triathlon stuff, one, how did you start doing that? Or when did that happen? And did you see a difference in the way that you showed up around people and operated throughout the day when you had to find time to work out, and then it's a hard workout? Like, was something happening to you both physiologically, psychologically, mentally, spiritually? Because I've gotten that from a lot of triathletes, that it's more than just let's go do this race.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the onus behind that, and actually just to touch on what you just described, I mean, I've found that I show up better professionally. I show up better personally. Well, I show up better professionally and as a father and a husband when I am challenging myself personally. To kind of touch on that point of like, how did I show up differently? Most certainly. Absolutely. I think it helped every facet of my life by doing these challenges. And so the onus behind it was probably like, I think 4 years ago now. There was basically, I read a lot and I'm like following these podcasts and all these like sort of, new age gurus, right? Jesse Itzler and like some of these guys, right? And one of the tenets that these guys espouse is, put a challenge on the calendar every year, something that takes you out of your comfort zone. So I sort of like read that and so I thought, well, look, I could put like a half marathon or something like that or marathon on the schedule, but I can run. I know I can run. Like, that's not going to be that. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Doing a marathon is challenging, but it wasn't going to put me that far out of my comfort zone. So that's how I picked a triathlon. I was like, well, look, I'm not a great swimmer. I haven't been on a bike since I was in junior high. So the onus was, let me put something on the calendar that I can just, mark as a challenge and then work my way towards it and not allow myself to like take it off the calendar. So yeah, that was about 4 years ago, and I did my first try. I started, small. I started with a sprint triathlon, shorter distances. It's kind of like allowing yourself to baby step into it. And then, I've made my way up. I've done an Olympic distance triathlon. I got a buddy who's trying to convince me to get into the Ironman, half Ironman thing. I'm not sure that I'm ready to commit to that. So yeah, I mean, the tries it's this thing to kind of push me out of my comfort zone. It's an amazing escape, right? I've found that I love swimming. I mean, I never knew that I'd love like getting in a pool and cranking out laps for 45 minutes, but I absolutely love it. I like look forward to it now. I really enjoy getting on my bike, and these are things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. So it definitely changed how I showed up, because it exposed me to some things that I just otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to. And then, like I said, this like sort of personal challenge stretched me, and I think it made me show up in my professional life in a different way. It made me show up as a father and as a husband in a different way. Yeah, and now I got to figure out what that means. Like, what else can I sort of put out there and put on the calendar? There's obviously these physical challenges and athletic oriented challenges, but what else is out there? And I'm trying to wrap my head around that. And I haven't necessarily figured it out yet, but I want to evolve this. I want to, and I just need to kind of think through what that might look like.
In 2017, I did a couple things, and I set out to just develop a new relationship with fear. I wanted to lean into fear, do something that scares me, and try to do that every year. And I think I got that either from Tony Robbins or Russell Brand, or I think we follow a lot of Rich Roll, like a lot of the same people. I don't know. It was something. It was
Yeah,
something.
for sure. I mean, I think that's the crux of it, right? It's like basically fear, being out of your comfort zone, and exposing yourself to that, purposefully exposing yourself to that, will create growth. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I mean, all that stuff sounds cliche, but I mean, it's legit.
It's true, though. That's
It
why
freaking
people are
works.
saying it. Yeah.
It freaking works.
That's why it all adds up.
Yeah.
Like whatever you're doing. And, so TM, talk to me. Like, how did you find that? Were you doing any meditation before you started doing that? Or
Yeah,
what
so
led you there?
I was, I like everyone else, probably like jumped on the apps, Headspace, and I've been doing that for a few years. Nothing really stuck. It didn't really like click for me. I was sort of inconsistent with it. Over a random conversation with one of my wife's friends, she was mentioning to us that she had started TM and it was, sort of really working for her. She was like really passionate about it. And I thought, maybe there's something there, like maybe I ought to check it out. Right. And I didn't want to like just, be judgmental or sort of write it off. So I thought maybe there's something there. Like, let me go check it out. And so signed up for the introductory course, which they give you, you go to like some library. I was at the library in Arlington on Quincy Boulevard and like in the basement in some small room. I was like, well, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to give it a shot. Yeah. So they do this 4-day course and they teach you the methodology. TM is basically a mantra-based meditation. And so you're focusing on chanting a mantra in your mind, which for me really works because I could never do that thing where you just clear your mind. I can't ever get my mind clear. I can't get it to like completely go blank. Yeah. So being able to focus in on a phrase or a mantra that I'm just repeating sort of helped me get that focus and help me hone in. So it's been great. I mean, look, I'm still early stages, what am I, like 9 months into this thing? But I like it. And it sort of clicks a little bit more for me than the other mindfulness stuff. And so, yeah, I'm going to go with it for now.
Well, I guess, yeah, we're coming up to time here. I just wanted to thank you again for.
Well, that went fast, man.
Yeah. I've got time. I don't, but I just want to be respectful for your schedule. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us and just sharing with us, right? A lot of great information in there.
Well, I love it, man. I'm going to be a big fan of this podcast. I'll market it through my own personal.
Thanks for listening to DC Local Leaders. We'd love to connect with you. Find us on LinkedIn and YouTube by searching DC Local Leaders, on Instagram at DC Local Leaders, or our website, dclocalleaders.com. You can find the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google, or wherever you find great podcasts. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you're a business leader and have questions on your lease and how it impacts your business's opportunities to grow, or have questions about the market, you can reach Philip directly at philip.nathram@transwestern.com. He'd love to speak with you. Until next time.